Okay, call to order. It is 7 o'clock. It is the 22nd of February in 2021. And this is a meeting, a business meeting of the Stayton City Council. And so let's go to public comment. Staff and council are here. We have a quorum. Go ahead, please, Elizabeth.
All right, I will ask Dina to pop on here. She's on the call. She'll be our one person who requested to do public comment tonight. There she is. Oh, there she is.
Hi, everyone.
And Dina, when you start, if you could just let us know your name and your address and for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm Dina Freris. We reside at 705 East Pine Street here in Stayton. I would like to give public testimony on the upcoming levy consideration for the May 18th ballot regarding the levy for the library, parks, and pool. I would just like to advocate for consideration to split the levy between the library, to isolate the library, and then partner the pool and parks on a separate levy question to the residents of the community. I believe in both, supporting both, and would proud to say that I would vote in favor of a separate levy for the library as well as a levy for the pool and parks. We believe in all of these as vital pieces of our community, and we just really want to see them pass. And so it's because of that desire that on behalf of Tyler and myself, we would really like to see the voters have a different option to consider rather than presenting the same tax levy that we've all seen now would be for the third tax. Let's see, the third election. Oh my gosh, I had my notes here. So the point is, we've seen it fail two times. I'd hate to see it fail again. And I would really like to see us draft a levy that would be specific to the library, and then a second levy that would be specific to the pool and park. I think they're strong enough to stand on their own, and it will, I think it would be our best option to see these pass. So I don't know if you have any specific questions for me, but that I just wanted to make sure that we were heard on that. And thank you guys. This has been such an unprecedented season to be an elected official. I do not envy any of you. We appreciate each and every one of you, Mayor Porter, each of you counselors. I've seen all of you out with your sleeves rolled up, and we're really, really grateful after or through a pandemic, wildfire, and ice. Stay strong, and we're behind you, and we appreciate all the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Dina. Thank you very much. Yes. Okay.
So I'm going to sign off. I'm actually concurrently doing a legislative wildfire hearing. So I've got another screen up here. Hopefully I'm muted. Otherwise, the whole state just heard what I have to say about Stayton's ballot. But thank you again, and thanks for letting me be brief.
Thank you for your input. Thank you, Dina.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dina.
Okay. Let's see. Alyssa, can you get us back on track here? There we go.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay. Okay. So we're back. Let's go to business. A consent agenda for the 1st of February. Everyone's had a chance to look at that, I hope. And could we get some action on it, please?
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Patty. I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second, please?
Seconded.
Okay. Thank you, Ben. A motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as presented. Alyssa, would you go ahead and poll the council, please?
Sure. Councilor Patty?
Yes.
Counselor Hook? Oh, I can't hear you, Paige. You were unmuted, but there we go.
Abstaining. I was excused muted or excused absent. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. Counselor McDonald
Yes.
and Counselor Mullen?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm not sure if Counselor Ort is able to.
Yes.
Okay, Counselor Ort, right.
Yes,
All
you're
right.
good. All right.
Motion passes 4-0 with 1 abstention.
All right, our next item this evening is under general business, a fiscal year 2021 second quarter financial report as of the end of December 31st. So Susanna, would you take us through that, please?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Yes, this evening I'm going to present to you the financials for the second quarter through December 31st. See if I can, oh, is that going to mess me up? All right, let's see. Can everyone see that?
Yes, I can.
Yes.
All right, open this so I can see. Okay, so as I said, this is going to be the financials through December 31st of 2020. Is it going to work? So my talking points this evening will be reviewing the fiscal report that's in your council packet, as well as looking at the revenue through December 31st for quarter 2, comparing it to the prior year revenue, looking at some economic effects, concerns going forward, action we've taken, looking at quarter 2's expenses, funds that are in a major concern, and what we're looking at going forward. So in your council packet, you have your financial report. It's the same format that I gave you from quarter 1. So now what we're looking at as the first column in your peaches color is your financials as of December 31st of 2019. Your second column is our current fiscal year through December 31st of 20. The white column next to that is our budget, and then the variance between budget to actuals in this current fiscal year. And you guys can see that in your financial report. Mm-hmm. Now that we've completed 50% of the year, the percentage zones change for what we need to be looking at when we're looking at the percent of expenditures to budget. So all of your funds that are in green have all spent 46% or less of the budget to this point. That is well under the 50%, and they're green because there's no concerns to watch that going forward. The funds that are yellow are between the 47 to 52% of their budget is expensed. That is yellow because it might be fine, because it may have some one-time annual expenses that are in there that may have tilted the percentage a little bit. But when we look at a longer period, it's probably fine. It's just something to take a look at, keep our eye on, and just kind of make sure we know why we're there at that percentage in that yellow zone. The red zone is definitely 53% or higher is spent. That is something we need to take some more closely look at to ensure what's happening in there and make adjustments accordingly to prevent it from going over our spending authority. The only fund that's in the red, I do believe, is the court, and that's a budget issue from the original budget adoption, which will be addressed when we do the budget revision, hopefully by next month or the first part of April. So taking a look at the revenue as a whole for the whole city, taking a look at this big picture. This big picture, now that we've collected basically all the property tax that we're going to collect. Historically, by this point, we've collected 95 to 98% of our property tax. So this gives us a pretty good realistic picture of how these funds break out for total revenue to the city. You can see that our charge for services are still number one fund that the city depends on, with taxes being second at 39%. And then the intergovernmental and miscellaneous are 8 and 9%, which is smaller. But our miscellaneous revenue, again, is a combination of interest and fees and miscellaneous grants and things like that that make up that miscellaneous portion. When we're looking at the revenue from as of December 31st of 2019 to this year, you can see that we have a declining in revenue that's still happening that I spoke to on quarter one. We're still declining. At this point, we're looking at a little over $150,000 loss in revenue compared to what we collected at this exact same time last year. And that's a combination of intergovernmental funds and other revenues. Our taxes at showing a 17% or $17,000 increase is really a flat line, because historically we should see a 2 to 3% increase in property taxes. Last quarter, when we talked about this, and I gave you the collection rate and showed you from 07's recession and how the pattern went from flat, drop, flat. You're seeing the beginning of that same pattern where first we see a flattening out of revenue, and then we probably will see it drop some more. When I'm looking at charge for services, it's showing an increase, but it's actually not an increase. So if we take a closer dive into what's actually in our charge for services, you'll see these three graphs. What I've done is I took in the three major areas where we collect charge for service, which is our SDC funds, our utility funds, and then the pool, general fund, and all those other little miscellaneous funds that bring in the charge for service. And what I've done is I've created three columns looking at the exact time periods. So you're looking at the first column for the SDCs for the 316,000. That's at what we've collected as of December 31st of 20. The next column is what we've collected as of December 31st of 2019. And the column after that is December 31st as of 2018. And so you see the same time period for each one of these graphs. Now, because the SDC funds are strictly driven by project based, you can see we got a large amount of SDCs this year because of the Taco Bell project. And so that's why it looks like we made an increase in that 34,000 because of this Taco Bell project. And you can see last year we didn't have very many projects, and you see in 2018 we had more projects. So if you take that SDC funds out of our equation, you can see that our utility funds are actually down about $160,000. That's a combination of NORPAC being closed and also the pandemic for customers not able to pay their full utility bills on a regular basis. And then, of course, the pool and the general fund and the library and those other funds that have miscellaneous charge for service, the biggest weight in that decrease is the pool's closure at this time. So taking the SDCs again out of the equation, you can see in this bar graph that the taxes are flatlining, and we're seeing a decrease in our other funds are compared to last year. We're seeing this slow, steady decline in revenue at this point. Actually, breathe in case you have questions. I'm not going too fast, am I? Okay. So taking a closer look at our property tax, we normally collect about 95% of our property taxes of the assessed value. So I mentioned that last quarter, but this quarter, now that we've collected the revenue, we can see that our collection rate has come in at a 90% of the $2 million assessed value, which is about a 5% loss for this fiscal year, which equates to about $115,000 that we did not collect this year for property tax. Budget-wise, we got last year just under $2 million. So we flatlined it and rounded it out to an even $2 million. And we can see we got a little bit above what our budget projections. So we did pretty good at that part. Pulling the same reports from Marion County for the levy, you can see that we only had a collection rate of 88%, which is about a $30,000 loss. And for our actual budgets, we came in a little bit under what we projected, even though we did the same flatlining for how we received our taxes for this. Taking another closer look at the other part of our taxes, we can see in our local gas tax, I have the same three columns that I explained in SDC funds, the same 18-year, 2019, and 20-year, comparing these same timeframes as of December 31st. And you can see currently in this fiscal year for our local gas tax, we're about a $28,000 loss compared to what we've received from last year to date. Where the other 2 years, you can see they're really close in proximity for being the same. And for their intergovernmental portion of the ODOT gas tax that we collect, you can see that that one is about a $30,000 loss compared to the other 2 years, when you can see not 18 and 19, there wasn't too much of a difference. So again, you can see all of these revenues are slowly continuing to decline. Understanding that this pandemic has resulted in the things that the city supports us the most is our tax and charge for service. We're seeing that decline in our intergovernmental funds as well. It's also important to note that in our other funds, we currently are at 1.5% decrease in our interest rate for our interest that we get on our beginning fund balance. That's significant as we play out the rest of this fiscal year, and how long that climb out will bring that percent back up, as well as our franchise fees are down. So it's important just to see other areas as well that we're seeing the same consistent slowly decline. Now, like I said earlier, that when we budgeted this current year, we budgeted at 0. And we're at this point, from what I'm hearing from the other cities and what the people, the states and the cities in Oregon are looking at, potentially an additional 5 to 10% decrease as we're preparing the next budget. What does that look like? A 5% cut on the current collection that we got for this fiscal year would be an additional $100,000 loss. It's important to understand that this doesn't mean just 100,000 this year. That means we lost 115 this current year, and we're going to get down another 100. That's a $200,000 loss to the general fund that will really affect what we're going to do budget-wise and what we need to be looking at for protecting essential services in the general fund. If we have to go to as high as a 10% decrease, we're looking at closer to $300,000 between this current year and next year. Then that's significant. And that's why it's really important to understand, even though this looks like very small numbers are declining, they are still compounding on top of each other. And a $200,000 to $300,000 loss in the general fund would be a significant hit to the services that we provide. Any questions so far? I know it's depressing, isn't it?
Mr. Mayor, this is Counselor Ward. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Susanna, can you go back maybe one slide? You said like that we get revenue from interest rates. It was like
I'm sorry. Say that one more time.
Okay, if you go back maybe one or two slides, you were talking about other revenue, and you were talking about we get revenue from interest rates, and it had the parentheses of 1.5% down or something. That
Yes.
one, yeah. Can you explain? I don't really understand that portion. Can you kind of explain that, please?
So our beginning fund balances sit in an account that's held at the state, and that they give us an interest rate. Last year we got 2.25%. We're now down to 0.75%. So that beginning fund balance that we're using to help us sustain fiscal policies and money for unexpected catastrophes and those kind of things, we're collecting a much lower interest rate on those funds that are currently in that account.
Why are we collecting less interest on it?
Because of the impact of the economy has reduced their ability for their interest rate to be what it is.
Okay, thank you for explaining that.
You're welcome.
The state's adjusting that. Okay.
Yeah, it's just like our banks, right? Our interest rate is messed with all the time based on the stability of our economy.
Okay. Wow.
I understand that the pandemic is always in the front of our mind, and we have now, starting next month, we've been living through the COVID-19 pandemic for an entire year. But the other pieces of the things that affect our city needs to be brought to our attention as well, because we've also had some very severe natural disasters. Can't even say that. We've had wildfires toward the end of the fiscal year, at the end of the year, and then last month, or just currently, not even last month, we're still cleaning up debris from the ice storms. These things affect us just as much as the pandemic, because these are expenditures we weren't planning on. We weren't prepared for the increase in overtime, because our police department is also our emergency management responders. And they're responding to not only the fires, but helping navigate streets with downed trees, as well as our public works department out there handling the situation, increase in those expenditures, as well as to clean up the debris from the ice storm, was all unexpected. And as we're beginning our official kickoff this month with our department heads, the beginning of budget season, this is when understanding our fiscal policies and why we have our contingencies and why we have our beginning fund balances to be able to do these things and meet the need of our community to take care of them in these situations, so we can get our streets cleaned quickly. We can have our community center open for helping them. So these things we plan and think about when we're doing our budget. So I wanted to bring these to your attention. And also, it hits in places sometimes we don't think about. The fact that we were evacuated for long periods of time, and then we have long power outages. Those affect, and then of course the pandemic and people's ability to pay utility bills is driving down our franchise fees as well. So all of these things are affecting all of us at the same time. It's a tough time to be in an historical event back to back, isn't it not? So what does this mean for us at this point? We need to we need to really focus on our short-term goals and what we're looking at. I meet with the department heads on a monthly basis. We have their budget, their actuals against what we're projecting out to look like. At the same time, we're looking at our 5-year projections. I'm literally looking at the past, the present, and the future all at the same time when we meet with the team. So we're constantly having this in front of us on what we need to do. We don't know the impacts and how long this COVID is going to affect our economy. So we don't know really how long or how deep these declines are going to be, but we need to strategically be planning for that and watching closely in our long range for our cash balances. We need to have cash in order to pay our staff to do the things they need to do for the city, as well as cleanup and monitoring and funding balance. These are all critical things that we're watching minute by minute, and we'll be strategically planning and having a lot of really hard conversations with the budget committee and council as we start preparing these things going forward. And I will be bringing back this current budget with this reduction in revenue that we're facing to help us anticipation for what's coming. So what does that look like? When I say to you, we need to watch beginning fund balance and cash flow and those kind of things. Because the department heads right now have this template, and we're literally looking at right now today and the 5-year projections at the same time. This is what our team is faced against for building a budget. Because if we look at right now, just where we're at, this minute snapshot with the estimations of where we're sitting, you can see that the general fund, the park, and the library will not meet our fiscal policies next year. And that isn't good because of the things we just talked about having funds for disasters and those kind of things. So these funds would already, at the start of next fiscal year, would be out of policy. The water and the sewer is one more year away from being out of fiscal policy. The next situation that is critical that we need to watch closely is 3 to 4 years out. We're looking at negative fund balances. That means we don't have enough cash to meet our payroll, to meet the needs of the community. That is if nothing changed right now. And as you've seen from last quarter to this quarter, we've already had a pretty good impact. So this is just to give you a snapshot picture of what we need to be looking at as we're preparing, as the department heads are looking at what they need to do to reduce what they're currently doing and planning for how they're going to continue to stay in front of this downward trend. to keep the finances and the things stable. So this is where we're at this moment. So this wanted you to see that. And of course, all of the things that the staff is currently working on, which I just mentioned. Do I have any questions on this revenue piece or this part before I start talking about expenditures? I know this is a lot of information. I want to give you time to make sure that this is making sense as we're preparing for this whole budget season and looking at where we're at.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead. Councilor Order.
Councilor Ord again. Susanna, so you've spoken about like us being like compliant with our fiscal policies and whatnot. So what does that mean in terms of, do we get fined by the state if we're out of compliance, or so what does that mean for us if that happens?
We don't get a fine, but it does put us out of compliance, and that will be noted in our audit that we're out of compliance with our fiscal policies. But also, more importantly, it means that we're beginning to move our city into a dangerous zone for having the cash necessities and the things we need to take care of the city. Because our policies is like step one of that part. Keith is going to add to this. You have something to add, Keith?
Yeah, so I mean, the fiscal policies weren't in place with the city until 2017. So as we've been going through making adjustments to our budgeting process, making adjustments to how we're doing all of this, we created fiscal policies in 2017, and really it's kind of a best practices and trying to be more forward thinking and all of that too. So this is all part of what we adopt, and we can bring those back and have another conversation about those again. But those really are sort of the best practices that we've put in place in terms of trying to make sure that we are being fiscally responsible, that we're being transparent, and that we are following what I would say are generally accepted best practices and policies and procedures for how we're budgeting, how we're monitoring our budgeting, and how we're comparing ourselves to like-minded cities, so that people can look at our data and information and really get a good snapshot of how we are financially. So, when Councilor Ord asked about the fines and the audit and all of this, this was something that hadn't been with the city prior to 2017. So this is still kind of a new concept out in the community. So I wanted to get on and sort of talk about it. And it's something that we've been looking at, and it was just an important financial tool for us to have in place as we've moved to that GFOA budget, as we move to the 5-year plans, and just trying to take a longer term snapshot and understanding of what our budgetary situation is, both short term and long term, so we can make good decisions both now and planning in the future. So that's my quick little speech on kind of the history of our fiscal policies and how they came about.
Well, Keith, what it can sound like from this end is that it's just more and more things we don't get done. Fewer streets that get fixed, just less activity on our part. It'd be nice to see some hope in all of this. But anyway, thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that is kind of important is we've talked about tightening our belt last year, made some moves to try to be prepared for that, took some steps to do it. But what we're seeing is maybe those aren't going to be as sufficient as we initially hoped, and so it does mean it's going to limit our ability for spending outside of core services, and it does mean we're going to have conversations about really what are the priorities of the city in terms of projects and spending, and how we fund those. As for streets, which I know are important, as Susanna's presentation showed, we're seeing revenues down, which of course is going to have an impact on how much work we can do. So, those are just important things for people to understand, what the impacts of some of these financial situations are, so that we can have realistic expectations in the short term of what we can and can't do, and what that means, long term too, for wanting to accomplish some of our goals and objectives.
Okay. Thank you, Keith. Susanna, moving right along.
Anybody else, any other questions on that thought before we move forward?
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah, go ahead.
this is Councilor Hook. Susanna, I have a question, just because I'm curious and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding the severity or not severity of the issue. Are we looking at anything like in the next, from what you're seeing with these trends, is there a possibility that we're going to be in so much trouble like what, like Damascus found themselves in or something like that? Or are we just going to have to make some really tough decisions?
Well, I'm trying to prevent that. This is why I'm telling you now where we're looking at it. And I'm showing you the screen that I showed you with how long we've got to prevent, right? And this is why I've changed how I'm presenting even to the department heads on a monthly basis, because we do not want to be in a situation where the sand beds collapsed, and we couldn't protect the water. We don't want to be in those places. And if we make these decisions now, I think can avoid that. There's no guarantee if we could avoid it or not, but we're going to do everything we can at this point to prevent us from having anything catastrophic. And hopefully, if we continue to slowly trim, we can stay with small adjustments over long periods of time to prevent that.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes. So this slide that we're looking at right here, that is, it's beautifully done and it looks friendly and cute, but it is not actually friendly and cute when we're looking at these columns that are like, these are actual like negative balances that we're looking at here. I'm kind of saying this also for people watching now and later. This is serious. This is like very serious stuff.
You don't want to see negative cash in 3 to 4 years out. You want to see out of fiscal compliance. That's okay, because we have 2 to 3 years to adjust. But to literally say we're going to be out of revenue in 3 years is not a good place to be. And that's why we really need to be looking at everything we're doing, focused on the community as a whole. What do we need to do to ensure the essential services, and where's our priorities lie? And that's when right now our departments are having those hard conversations. We're meeting as teams, brainstorming with each other what we need to do. And then when we sit down with the budget committee and you guys, we're going to have these really hard conversations. How do we prevent a negative cash situation?
And what would the impact be of, let's say, the levy, both either one or both levies passing coming spring? Is that going to significantly stop this negative fund balance from coming to fruition?
It could, for the parks and the library and the pool, it would slow it down, right? Okay. Because we would have this. We're still going to see the same decrease in how much we're collecting, but it would definitely empower them to make more long-term decisions to stretch that out so that they could be okay longer. I mean, this is why the library made their cuts now. This is why the pool is closed. This is why we're not doing a lot of capital projects, which I'll show you here in a second, so that we're trying to save right now to prepare for later. And that makes sense.
I'm so thankful for this reality check that you're giving us. I feel like this is just such a great presentation so far. So thank you so much for taking the time to really, really dig into this.
I mean, I would hope to say that all my projections are completely wrong and we're going to get the full 3% increase next year. That would be fantastic. But we can't plan on the pot. We need to plan on worst case scenario and hope for best case scenario. So the best thing we can do is plan for the worst. And then maybe in the middle of next year, we actually got more money and then we can open doors to spend. It's a lot harder to reduce what we've already spent out. It's a lot easier to add expenses. And that's really how we need to think of that in our going forward.
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Patty.
Yes, go ahead, David.
Yeah, thank you. Susanna, thank you for this so far. This has been super helpful, albeit bleak. Is there anything we can do now at this point that we haven't already done that can cut expenditures and expenses? I assume we were about to move on to that pretty soon here, but I thought as we launch into that, I'd like to ask that question up front. What can we do now to make this not as bleak for us?
Well, part of what we're doing is I am working on the losses that we're looking at and changing the budget, and about to send it out to the teams to look at where I suggest they cut even tighter. For example, the general fund, I'm looking at taking out over $200,000 of revenue. And I need to take that much revenue out because we've lost that much. But then I got to take a little more of expenditures to ensure that we stay in fiscal policy so we're prepared. So for the general fund, if it isn't a necessity, we need to hold back and not spend it. If it doesn't take care of, because the police department's in there, court is in there, police department is the biggest majority of our general fund, and they take in the biggest hit, right? So we need to be looking at those things.
Okay.
That helps.
All right. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. I guess you can say if it isn't super essential, we just don't need to do it right now. That's kind of what everyone's saying as they're looking every line item of expense that we've got going. Can it wait? And what would be the impact if we waited or didn't do it at all, ever? And then deciding from that direction.
Yeah, I would concur. Thank you, Susanna.
Any other questions before I go on to expenses? Well, in the positive, all of our expenses combined, we're only at 36%. So we're definitely, your department heads is an amazing team, and they have jumped to the reality of, whoa, put the brakes on. Okay, so we don't need to spend that right now. We don't need to do this. What's most important? Keeping the police officers out there on the street so they can do what they need to do, or whatever the necessities are. So they've really ratcheted down. And you can see that 52% of all of our, this is the same expense snapshot as the revenue, is our staffing. And because our staffing actually has to do the work. The way our city is designed, it takes our staff to physically do the work. So 52% of our budget is paying them to do the work. And then you can see we've only done 16% of capital projects, and overall 32% for materials and services and things that we've needed. So just to give you a really good visual snapshot of what I say when I say we've cut back on capital projects. Our original budget, we had budgeted $2.2 million in capital projects. We are 50% of the year complete, and we've only spent $700,000 out of that 2.2 that we had budgeted. And the expenses that were done in there is the police car was already on its way before COVID hit. So the general fund the police department got their car. The street fund is already finishing up the second year relationship with Marion County to do those overlays. We needed to complete that project. The savings and the benefit to the city was worth us getting that done. The wastewater fund is finishing up the second half of its 2-year master plan, needed to complete that project. So that needed to be finished. And the pool, of course, we're doing as much repair on that as we can, utilizing the opportunity to see about being able to open it if the levy passes. So that's where we're sitting with the capital projects. This is an example of our positive attempts to cut expenses. The pool, our pool. I know it's hard that the pool is closed, but the city is aggressively working on the maintenance issues of this pool and using the situation with the reduction in expenditures and staffing and turning that to repairs. So here's a list of repairs that we have done so far to this pool to prepare and stabilize it. Our facilities person, Mike, has done an outstanding job, better than I've ever seen since I've been in the city, of really giving us a really good look at the maintenance and the needs, and really laying out a new, improving the maintenance plan we already started, and really understanding what we need to do. And he's aggressively in there looking for what things are broken, close to breaking. And as you can see, we've done electrical repairs. We've had to do the electrical panels have needed issues, switches needed issues, valves have been replaced. He's monitoring the leak, trying to understand how much water the pool's actually losing. So he's been working really hard, even getting trip hazards and getting things organized in positive preparation that if the levy does pass, that we will get to open again. We still have a few major projects that we're still sitting on. The HVAC system, Oregon Trust looks like has put a bid together instead of replacing the entire system that we could just finish rebuilding. Because the city's done so much repair to it, they think we can just rebuild what's left instead of starting over. I'm still waiting on an answer on if they're going to approve that and how much they will give us for it. They sent me an email today saying they're negotiating back and forth between their two departments and they don't have a final answer. Hopefully I'm going to get it this month or first part of March. So we'll have that answer when we're meeting at the budget revisions. The ceiling lights, of course, will need a lift because they're really high up. So we're waiting on that as well. But those are the kind of repairs we have left to do. On the pool, I know we're waiting on the results of the levy, and the levy will determine if it's open. But I do want to remind you in the back of your mind to remember that even if the levy passes, this building is at the end of its life cycle and all this equipment is at its end. And we're going to need to start looking strategically at long-term planning on how we're going to keep this pool going or what we'll need to do, understanding where this pool is at. Just want that in the back of your mind so that it doesn't go away as we're moving forward and seeing what happens with the levy. And like I talked about earlier on Paige's question about what we're doing now, the library, that building is in a great shape. It's just got done not long ago before me, a lot of repairs and maintenance. So the maintenance plan on this is very stable. It doesn't have the same scenarios that the pool has, but it also is facing revenue issues. So effective January 1st, we've put cuts in place in preparation for no levy funds for what the library can do to sustain longer. So we've reduced its hours, we've reduced its staffing and put a stop to purchasing of new books and materials at this point as we're building new budgets and going forward and planning. Because these budgets will be built at this point without a levy, because the levy answer isn't going to come till real late by the time the budget process is done. The three most funds that we're still going to have to really watch is our water fund, our general fund, and our pool. That has not changed from last quarter to this quarter. And we're continuing doing the same things that we're doing last quarter. We're still working on these things. We're still looking at cost savings. We're still looking at grants. We're still looking. Lance is actually getting really creative and trying to look at other options for these sand beds because a loan is really not a great option at this point. So he's getting really creative and really thinking out of the box and what to do about that. So I want to give him kudos. We don't have an answer yet, but he's definitely stretching his ideas out there to what we can do going forward. I'll continue to update you. We're going to continue to monitor. When I bring this current fiscal year budget reduction back, will help us as we're moving forward as well. So, and any more questions?
Anyone?
I know it's depressing. Thank you all for your time.
Well, thank you, Susanna. Wonderful presentation. Gloomy, but wonderful. Okay. Let's go on then. The 5-year local option levy. Keith, can you take us through this? Where is he? There he is.
We're playing our musical chairs here, so please be patient with us here. I'm going to present tonight. I'm going to ask for other people to be ready to hop on and answer questions. We've been talking about this a lot here recently, but we've been trying to emphasize, although my name is on this memo as from me, this really was a collaborative process that involved Jana with the library, involved Susanna as the finance director, involved Lance overseeing the parks, and myself, and then a lot of communication with stakeholders. So I don't necessarily want to regurgitate everything in my staff memo, but I do want to sort of emphasize a couple things, and just for people out there watching to understand sort of the situation we're in. So the state of Oregon passed Measure 47 and Measure 50. That was in 1996 and 1997. And what that did is that set a permanent freeze at the taxing jurisdiction that the city has for property tax on the assessed values of what we can charge. And so this is something that happened statewide. It was unexpected. Whatever rate you had when Measure 50 passes became your permanent taxing levy rate that you could set for your community. So that's required us and many other communities to look for local option levies to support additional services and funds. And so since 1999, we've relied on the local option levy to support our parks, our pools, and our library. So this has been something that's been in continuation since 1999. That 2020 was the time for us to come back for consideration. And as you all know, we tried in May of 2020 and we tried in November of 2020 for two different levies, and unfortunately both were unsuccessful. During this time we can talk about why it failed. There's a lot of reasons with COVID and this and that, but the bottom line and the hard reality is simply this: we've asked the voters twice, and the voters twice have said no. So something I do want to read from my memo was something that we had said in August of last year when we were looking at going out for the second time for the levy, which is failure in November of 2020 could lead to a ballot fatigue in the spring of 2021 from voters who will no longer continue to support a levy after consecutive failures. It's also anticipated that in 2021 we could see other jurisdictions on the ballot as well, seeking taxpayer support for their respective entities. The short and long-term uncertainties and the fiscal impacts of COVID-19 cause additional challenges for voters who may be unwilling to support a levy during a fiscal downturn or during an uncertain fiscal future. And that's still the reality we're facing right now is we are asking for a levy at a time when there's a lot of fiscal uncertainty. After listening to Susanna's budget, you can kind of hear some of the fiscal challenges, not only through us, but you can see that through our community and our assessed values and tax values that we're having. Hold on really quick here. I'm going to admit Councilor Ort officially, although she's been on. Jordan, are you there? Councilor Ort, there she is. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Sorry, I had somebody pointing like, let Councilor Ort in. So.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. So I've mentioned the other people. I want to say that staff has spent a lot of time in a lot of meetings, both from a staff level, both from small groups, large groups, individual meetings with stakeholders for all of the entities, with parks, with the pools, with the library. We did a Zoom inviting all of them where one evening we sat and we talked about all the challenges and issues. And really what came out of all these discussions was an idea, maybe it was time to try something new. Ms. Ferris mentioned that as well, and the idea was what was officially known as option number 1 in your options before you, which is to split the levy into 2 proposals, a library levy, and that we're referring to as a recreational levy for the parks and the pool. So that would be an option number 1. And this is really coming about, like I said, from all of the staff members meeting with stakeholders in individual small groups and even large meetings, with all of us having conversations about what the best path forward is, what opportunities for success we have, and that's the levy option that we are officially recommending tonight. We wanted to give you guys other options, so we went ahead and we left option number 2, which is to keep the levy as a single levy, which is the library, parks, and pool, basically mimicking what we did in December of last year. So what's going to happen when you approve this is this levy will go forward on May 18th of 2021. As Susanna had previously just stated, our budget will have to be written with assumption that the levy will not pass in whatever entity that is. So if the levy does pass, we'll have to come back for a supplemental budget to make adjustments based off of that. But at this point, we have to assume with 2 previous failures that and in an uncertainty going forward, that would be the most fiscally conservative and responsible thing to do. So I wanted to state that since the date of this levy going forward being May 18th, by the time it's certified, we'd be looking at basically right as the start of that fiscal year when we'd have a knowledge of taking forward whatever would pass. So with that, I'll let, if Lance or Jana or Susanna wants to jump in, they feel like I've missed something or wanted to speak on something more, they definitely can, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that council has on the proposals and the recommendations we have before you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead, somebody.
Councilor Hook here. Keith, thank you so much for this great presentation on the levy. It's very easy to understand. I do have one question on the option 1 versus option 2. I am not a finance professional, but I'm looking at the library and the recreation, and I'm seeing that those combined are like 90 cents. but the option 2, library, parks, and pool, is 65 cents. So I'm wondering why we have such a difference between how much we're going to collect overall. Like when you look at the anticipated revenue at the end, there's quite a big difference in those two. Why are we trying to collect more? I'm sure there's a reason for it.
No, I mean, the reason was, looking back and talking to people who were around when this levy first went forward in 1999, the levy amount was just sort of set at an amount that they felt was something that could pass. It really didn't look at anything in particular. And ever since then, we've just kind of always, it's appeal to tradition, if you will. We've always done what we've always done. So what we did in this situation was we looked at it and said, if we were going to split them, what would be the proper amounts to have in there to really get into the idea of making sure that these entities would have the funding that they would need going forward. I won't say to fully fund them, but to more richly fund them, to put us in a position going forward with these to be successful. And so that really was, I think, one of the things that had an appeal to the stakeholders that were involved in these conversations was liking the idea of trying to make sure that the funding was there to keep these entities at a stronger pace. I think there was a lot of feeling of cooperation amongst the groups, but that it might be easier to really divide these two, and then for people to really be able to choose and understand what they are. And then going forward with the funding to have a more rich funding source to hopefully help all these entities survive going forward.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, go ahead, Counselor.
Councilor Orr. Keith, thank you for that explanation. I'm just a little concerned, though, when the first time we tried to pass the levy, we asked for 75 cents per thousand, right?
70 cents.
Okay, 70 cents. And so we dropped it back down to the 65 the second time. My biggest concern with option 1 is that combined, it's 90 cents, which is 20 cents over what we had asked for before, and the voter said no. So I think probably the intention here is that one of these is going to pass and possibly not the other. And that's probably why they're split up, is my thinking.
Yeah, I mean, the thinking really
I just don't quite understand. I just don't quite understand why we split them up. But it's still an even more amount than we had asked for before.
Yeah, I mean, I think really the answer to why splitting it was, we had talked about this before, of going back for the third time with something. And I've talked to former peers of mine who oversee elections. I talked to Ross, our city attorney, who helps oversee this. And the feeling was doing the same thing, even at a 60 cent or 65 cent of what would be option number 2, you're going to start to see ballot fatigue of feeling like the question has been asked and answered. So, basically for 2 straight times, the community is asked. So people who would normally feel that they could support it wouldn't support it. And I think also the idea was this is giving something new and giving an opportunity for these entities to really highlight what they can do, and to come forward and let the community know this is more of a need and could hopefully help them understand why the library is important and why what we're calling a recreation district would be important as well.
Okay. I have another question, Mr. Mayor.
Sure. Go ahead.
So how will these be? So if we went with option 1, I'm assuming that the wording is going to be different on the ballots this time. Because obviously they're going to be separated. And I feel like we've talked about this before with the last one, but the language was even the same. And I heard from many people that it was confusing.
So I think one of the things that people need to understand, is something we've talked about, is the language we have to put forward is set by statute and by city attorneys. So basically, I think one of the things that there is limitations on what the ballot language looks like and how it is. I mentioned in the last one, we had to get legal counsel involved because there was a dispute on that. There is options for people to talk about what the levy is. Unfortunately, we as a city cannot do that. You as council members can, and entities and PACs and people in the community and people who want to write letters of support or to get support letters in the the ballot information packet, can do that. But we as a city are set. And so we've talked to the stakeholders to say the language that you see on that ballot is language that's basically limited and required by law, with very little leeway. But there are other ways to talk about doing that. And again, just want to emphasize, because we also talk to stakeholders to say we as a staff cannot in any way advocate for or be perceived as advocating for. We can only educate and inform. So other entities can do that, and we've encouraged those stakeholders to be aggressive in those kind of things to help with that. I understand that the ballot language is confusing. I'm not going to disagree with that. I'm just going to state that we are limited by law on what we can and can't do, and there's very little wiggle room or changes we can make in that.
Well, Keith, as I understood it, the confusion came from people's perception that it was a new tax instead of a continuation. Is that pretty much correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things coming out of some of the meetings with stakeholders is there's an overwhelming amount of information, and unfortunately, a lot of it would be what I would say not good or accurate information. So one of the conversations we had with the stakeholders was, to do that, and we as a city can make sure that we put out information that, again, not advocating, but just educate, and then work with those stakeholders to make sure that they have good information and right information to give to the public, so that they're making correct and informed decisions. So that is what we can do, and that is rich conversations I think we've had with stakeholders regarding how to go forward and to do that. The process seemed to have worked from 1999 until 2020. We're in a different time. So I think the stakeholders are really, I think a really good, great group of people and a really dedicated group of people. And you saw one come testify tonight, but I think they're really understanding and ready to work hard to make sure the public has a good, rich picture of that, and to strike down, I think, some of the unfortunate rumors and gossip that's out there. And we tried even in our previous presentation to talk about some things, and part of that was to get in front of some of the rumors and gossips about the pool and about the library and the current situation. So those are things that we can do to make sure that there's an understanding out in the community what's happening and what's going on. So, to be honest, Susanna's presentation talking about what we've done with the pool and what we've done with those resources very much was another rumor out there was we were already ready to scuttlebutt. We had given up on the pool. She talked about Mike being over there. I was over talking to Mike earlier. He's there every day checking on that pool, doing a lot of those repairs. And we're really trying to put ourselves in a position that if this levy passes, that pool is going to be in the best shape it's been in 10 or 15 years. So our focus and our mission has been in these conversations of how to be successful, how to pass the levies, how to make sure the voters know, and how we can help as a city to make sure those advocates have the information that they need.
Okay, all right, thank you, Keith. Councilors, shall we jump into a discussion of what we want to do with these proposals?
No, I have another question, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, go ahead.
Keith, you talked about the stakeholders. Were they a combination of people? I know Dina's part of the library, but the parks and the pool, were they part of the discussion?
Yeah, so we've had private conversations, we've had small group conversations, and then we've had a group Zoom conversation that included stakeholders from the pool. I will say that the stakeholders from the pool, that some of them aren't Stayton residents. And that's great in some ways, but just to make sure, and Lance, you're hopping on, and to have,
yes, I am.
To have conversations with parks folks and then library folks. I know Ms. Ferris decided to testify tonight as library, but we really did have rich conversations. And then we went back and had conversations, and they're hopping on to talk about, I think, the conversations they had as well. But our goal very much was to include all three of those entities, to make them feel like they were engaged and had questions answered. I know we had a Zoom meeting one night in the evenings. That was the best time for everybody to meet, and I thought it was a great conversation. So Lance and Jana, I don't need to speak anymore. I'll let you guys talk about some of that, and I'll be quiet here.
I just wanted to make 2 points real quick. I hadn't planned on coming on. I've been working out and jumped on at 7 o'clock, and here I am. But the Parks Board chairman was at this meeting, As you all know, I think the mayor will probably, hopefully ask you folks to vote for another Parks Board member. We have 3 Parks Board members. All 3 of them were at this meeting. They're all in support of this. That was the point number 1. I want to make sure that, Jordan, that you realized that, or I'm sorry, Paige, that you realized that there was support from everybody that showed up from the Parks Board. The second point I want to make is that the reason that we did separate that, one of the reasons I should say, you have to realize that the levy itself in the past only contributed $10,000 to the parks, which is only 3% of the parks budget. So we decided if we're going to go and we're going to separate that and make a recreational district, we might as well look at what it actually is going to take to support the parks department accordingly. The rest of the parks budget comes out of the general fund. And so what we want to do is trying to shift some of those funds from the general fund to the parks department and let people make that choice if parks are valuable to them. And that's really what this is about. Make your choice, what's valuable to you and your community in these days and times. And that's it. That's really all I have to add. Thanks.
Thank you, Lance.
Jana, do you want to hop on and just?
Yeah, I was just going to tell Jordan or Councilor Ert that I think she'd be really happy with the demographics of that meeting. I don't think we could have had a more balanced stakeholder group. And I was actually really excited about the pretty much even turnout from each group and the involvement and the desire for these to pass. And I think you'd be really proud of that group that came to that meeting. So
Thank you.
Susanna, you jumped on. You were on this part of those meetings too. I guess you can add what you want to as well. When I say collaboration, folks, I really do mean it. So hold on. Go ahead, Susanna.
Well, since I kind of represent the pool in itself, that we did have the pool people and someone from the foundation, and they were eager as well to do this and like the thought of the recreation image. They're really focusing on that and versus in the library. So they were pleased with that wordage going forward.
Okay. Thank you, Susanna. Someone else?
Yes,
Mr. Mayor. Go ahead. Go ahead, Councilor Patty.
You're all good. I just was going to ask real quick, was consideration given to splitting off even further and dividing between the pool and the parks being their own separate line items for this? And if not, why?
No, we did consider that as well. We looked at having 3 options and decided that the 2 options we felt were the ones that received the most consideration were the option number 1, which is what the consensus was, and then option number 2, which was to look at that. We did look at basically splitting it, just like you said, amongst 3, but decided not to bring that one forward, just going with the top 2 options that we considered.
Why was that? Just out of curiosity.
I can go if you want.
Yeah.
I think, David, I might have had the loudest voice for concern of having three issues on the ballot with the city's name on it, and what that causes to voters, and concerns I had about like the pushover to maybe vote no on all of them, right? Instead of really thinking about, okay, the pool and the parks together really makes an elegant split of that, to have two solid options that I feel like have hope and a good chance to pass, rather than doing 3 separate and what that I guess that makes me really nervous, David. And I was a real loud proponent for like, let's do it in 2. Like,
so that option was presented to stakeholders, though. I guess I'm trying to get out.
I want to, yeah, we did. And I want to speak up because it's not really on Jana. This was a consensus. I brought up the Parks and Recreational District type proposal, which was the parks and the pool. Because that's Parks and Recreation in most cities. Most areas, it's Parks and Recreation, pools, parks, things like that. So I brought that up, and it makes a lot of sense. And then I brought up also all 3 separate to let, more of a cafeteria plan, if you will, and let the voters decide. And I think after a lot of discussion, we decided really the Parks and Recreational plan made the most sense to most of us, or if not all of us. So there was a consensus there, and that's why it was brought forward. And that's my interpretation. I could be completely wrong, but that was my interpretation of what went on.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
and the,
Thank you, Lance. Go ahead, Susanna.
and the other piece is that because we really did look at these funds as what they needed to stand and the impact of the general fund for where we're at. We didn't want to confuse the community anymore with three totally different interest rate or cents for each one versus as we already have with the two we did. So taking those into consideration as well, added to leaving the two options.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, this is whoever wants to answer this question. What were some of the ideas that were come up with to engage the public and give more education, information about why they should vote yes on any of these options?
We talked about ways to be successful in getting the message across. We one of the things I think was helpful about some of the meetings we had was to be able to bring everybody together under one umbrella, if you will, or one room where they could all have a conversation and sort of get to know each other, and to see that to really let them sort of during that conversation brainstorm and have ideas on how to get the word out, how what they did last time was, what they could do better, what could be more successful. One of the things that was tried last time that I think they're looking at, and again, I'm just speaking based off of what I heard and not advocating for this publicly, but was to look about trying to get that stakeholder letters of support, where the names kind of below that, to really advocate for that, talking about how to get the message across to people, making sure that they had good information and, if you will, some of the myth busters. And we've tried, like I said, to start to do that, and how they can engage during times of COVID. I mean, one of the things that had been successful for them in the past was going door to door and knocking. Didn't have that opportunity this time, but are looking for ways to do that. So, I definitely think part of the conversation was very much how to be successful. I felt like the group was really energized. I think they understand sort of how much is at stake, if you will. It really was a very diverse and interesting group of people, and I mean that interesting in a great way, and a cross section of people. So we as a staff just offered our support in what was chosen to help them make sure that they have the information they need and that they can come to us, so we can address rumors or myths, or they can have the data and information to be able to do that. So that was what I took from those conversations and those meetings of looking about how to be successful. They talked about ways to raise money for getting flyers out, for getting letters of support in there. So I think those are the other things. That's not something the city can participate in, but we were just part of that conversation as being the person to oversee that. And I will say, I really do think Lance said it. Lance said recommend a recreation district when we met with the stakeholders. And that really, I think, was the moment, sort of an aha moment for a lot of people, saying this was the best path forward and why option number one ultimately is what we suggested in front of you tonight.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Pete.
Yep. Jana, Susanna, Lance, you guys want to add anything to any of that?
No, sounds good.
Mr. Mayor.
I will.
Yeah, somebody.
Go ahead, Lance.
I'll add one more thing and then I'm going to jump off. I want to emphasize that when we had this meeting, it was much like tonight's meeting. We made the proposals, or Keith made the proposals as pretty much we're presenting tonight, and they made this decision. This really isn't our decision. It's a part of our decision, but the group that we met with was pretty much in consensus of what we're presenting tonight. And that's all I wanted to say. And with that, I'll bid you farewell. Thank you.
Well, and I guess we keep talking about the one meeting, but I guess, I've had numerous meetings on one-on-one with people. I've had numerous meetings with small groups. I know Jana has as well. I see her shaking her head. I know Lance has. I know Susanna, you've had quite a few conversations, mostly with Susanna has kind of been our advocate for the pool, if you will. So, she's really taken on that role as the staff member that oversaw that. So she had a lot of conversations with important stakeholders with the pool as well. And, I met with people who were around when these levies started passing in the 1990s, just to get an idea of what the history was and some of the thinking, just so we could understand what that was as well. So this really has been something over the last I would say 3 months has we've spent a lot of staff time and energy on, and then just staff meeting and discussing and talking as well. So that's really what's culminated in this coming forward tonight.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
This is Counselor Hook, and I just have a general question. Anyone can really answer it from city staff. But first off, I want to say I think it is, you guys have done a really great job of explaining how much work was put into this and how many voices were included in this, and I really appreciate that. I personally want to pitch out there that if somebody wants help with the campaign portion of it, please contact me, because I've got a little bit of experience there, and I am not city staff, so I can help with that. But my question is, I realized that the numbers were presented because that was the most ideal thing. I would love for us to be in an ideal situation. We're really not right now, and I know that it's really critical that we get some type of money and some type of levy passed. Otherwise, we're really going to be in trouble. What is the impact going to be if we were to reduce it down to that 35-cent split still, or that 65-cent split where it's like 30 cents for the library and 35 cents for parks and recreation stuff, which I love the recreation portion of that because I think it will really resonate with the city. But what's that impact going to look like if we keep it at that 65 cents? Is it going to be worth putting it on the ballot at all? I would think it would, but what does that look like?
Jana and Susanna, I mean, I guess I'll let both of you sort of hop on and kind of state, I mean, of why with this, and Lance talked a little bit about with the looking if we're going to have a recreation district to make sure parks was funded as well. But go ahead, both of you, because I know you can speak more richly than I can.
Go ahead, Jen. I'll let you start.
I would say, Paige, this is not ideal for us. Like 40 cents for us does not even make us where the library was previously. It is a step in the right direction and a starting place so that we stabilize and we start building back to where we are. But it's not an ideal number, Paige. So I wish it was. That would be fantastic. But I think we've all been very cautious and trying to get that number as low as possible. And I think at least for my number, that's not an ideal number for us.
Yeah, we had put the numbers up to ideal and was like, okay, let's lower it. So the parks and the pool would still see a significant reduction in what they'd be able to do as we did the same thing as we rebuild ourselves back up as well.
Okay. Did someone else have a question for staff before we go to council discussion on this?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like a comment on that previous back and forth there. I think and my personal questions have been answered by everybody else has asked the same question. So my only comment is that, the difference between 65 cents and 90 cents, that amount of money we needed. I think the messaging difficulty there is saying that, that 25 cents for the median household is less than a cup of coffee a month. And that messaging is going to be where we need to focus, not on, it's a 30% increase or whatever it looks like on paper. It's a couple bucks to keep things running. And I think that kind of focus will help get this thing passed quite a bit.
Thank you, Ben.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I have one more question.
Okay.
Oh,
Councilor.
I lost my screen. Okay. When you guys are having these conversations, and I know I brought this up before and it doesn't make you guys happy when I talk about it, but has the fact that a lot of these things have been closed to the public and or limited access for the last year, has that been talked about in conversations? I know that it's short-sighted, and so I understand that. However, we're dealing with a public who I've heard from several different people that where they would have voted for the levy before, they are not really satisfied with the current situation. And obviously that is not all on us. I completely understand that. So this is not coming from me. I need you to understand that. But when we are trying to pass this and now we're going to, maybe go in a different direction with it, this needs to be, this is kind of the elephant in the room too. So how, in these, okay, that's a long-winded, but in these conversations, have you talked about this and how it is perceived by the public, right or wrong?
So no, I think during the Zoom call that we talked about with all the stakeholders, we went through sort of the talking points of why this had failed. We talked previously about a couple of those, the language of the ballot language, and so we just explained that, and the issues with the city being short. And Councilor, you sort of mentioned this, and this is it. And this is a 5-year levy, and we're dealing with the pandemic right now and limitations. We couldn't have our pool open really, even if we wanted to. Limitations of what we're doing with library services. I would say, I understand people can't walk in, but in the short term, we are doing as well, and I would put us against any library, including Salem right now, in terms of services that we're offering. So we're trying to still show the value that we have. We're still trying to be flexible with all of this, and I think it's important to remind people that, the end, for the first time, I think, since this started, I think the end is in sight for the pandemic in terms of us being able to return to normal. And what we're really looking at is a levy that's going to extend for 5 years. So we understand short term this isn't ideal, but understand that long term, when the pandemic is over, and hopefully we don't have to deal with locusts or frogs or something else crazy next after fires and ice. But when all this is over with, we want to have our pool and our library, available and rich, in our parks. And so, the idea is the pandemic is coming to an end here, hopefully soon, or we'll be able to return to normal. And we want these services so that when things are back to, quote unquote normal, we'll have these things available. So that's really my kind of long-winded answer back to that. And so, we've tried to take this time to, I think, coming out of the library, for instance, I think there are some changes that have really been positive, and going forward, we hope to see. And we've tried to do things to continue to show the value just even beyond books, if you will. So, Jana, I'll let you speak to that too. I know you have some thoughts on this as well.
Sure. Yeah, Jordan, I think the message from the library is that we're not closed. Our building is closed. We're hitting all of our service targets for how we're getting books out to the community. We're serving children. We're doing programming. And I would hope that you would be proud of the way that the library has used, and the library staff has used this time to stretch and grow. I was talking to somebody the other day about how it would be really nice to maybe once in a while think inside the box for a little while. I'd be okay with that. But the library has used this time to really show the community our value, I think, and to remind people that we're not just a place to go get books, and that during this time, the amount of effort and thought and creativity that our staff has done during this is just incredible. And I'm with Keith, and I actually can see how we do against our comparables. The library is blowing it out of the water right now, and I hope that you would notice that. And I would be happy to talk to people. I tell people all the time, we're not closed. Our building's closed. The library is open. And I'm pretty proud of what we're doing there. And I think the community is responding accordingly. So.
And I guess I'll speak on the pool's behalf here. We try to show that we're using this downtime to take care of all of the minor repairs. I was blown away walking through the building. I'll brag about Mike Brasher a little bit, on the work that he's done and how great that building looks. We have another opportunity with a fund that's available from the community, and I've been in touch with the president of that organization, to maybe help with some of that. So, we're trying to be creative here to make sure that if these levies can pass, that long-term we're going to be set up in a good place. And so I think that's the message to the community as well.
And I can add to that my one-on-one conversations with Pool Patriots, because I get a lot of phone calls and people asking me what's going on. And even during the meeting when we were all together, they were so encouraged by the repairs that we are doing, and what we are doing to the building, and using this opportunity to get the building and the pool in a better place. They were actually very positive about that and very happy that they were sad they still had to wait, but they were encouraged by what we're doing. And I think from our group meeting as well as my one-on-ones that the Pool Patriots were very pleased that we're actively working on making this better for long-term.
Thank you, Susanna. Anything else from staff?
I have another question.
Okay, go ahead.
So when I was working with the school board, when they were considering their levy, they did polling. Is that something that we are able to do?
I would love to have the resources to be able to do that. I don't know how we would do that at this point. I have been in contact with one taxing entity who's looking about going out. The fire district and the school are both, I think, out there. So I think there is some consideration. To be perfectly blunt with you, I would prefer us not to be going out right now. But this is what it is, and this is the reality of our situation, and really we have no choice but to go forward. And that was a conversation I had with one of the other entities, and just saying, being asked if we were going to go forward, and me saying yes, and I really had no choice, and them understanding, some of them have a little more flexibility, but I do think there's a possibility at least one other taxing entity will be on the ballot as well. So that, again, that's not something we can control. It's just something with that, as our stakeholders are out trying to get the message across, it's just something they're going to have to work with to make sure that they can kind of get that signal through the noise, if you will.
Thank you.
Jordan, did that satisfy your question of polling?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Good. Anything else for staff before we go to council discussion on this? No? Okay, let's go to council discussion on this. Okay, what do you folks think we want to do on?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead, Councilor Hook.
Yeah, so this is Councilor Hook. I don't love what we have in front of us. I don't love it, but I know from the discussion that we've had that it is necessary. I trust our staff. I think that they do an incredible job. They have gotten so many people involved in this. And I think that a lot of the people that come to Stayton to live in Stayton do so because of what we provide in services. And we have to invest in those. And so personally, as nervous as I am to put something else on the ballot another time and possibly have one or both fail, I feel like it's something that I'm prepared to vote on at this point. I'd love to hear more thoughts from you guys also. But I just feel like we are so lucky to have the staff that we have right now during the time that we're in all the things that we faced. Because I don't really lose sleep at night wondering if our city staff are doing their jobs. They are totally doing their jobs. And these are hard decisions that we, signed up to make as counselors. And it's definitely been a weight, I think, on all of us, this topic. And so anyway, I know that I'm prepared to vote on this and choose an option, but I would love to hear from what you guys think of the discussion that we just had with staff.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, this is Councilor Pat.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to go ahead and circle back to something that I heard a little bit earlier with staff. I want everybody in town to know that the conversations that happen here, I don't know about other counselors, but it sounds like Councilor Orr and myself have received frequent, let's just call them inquiries about people wanting these city services open, wanting to use these city services. Now, us discussing that with staff and bringing that to staff is not to say that I don't believe that staff has done a terrific job dealing with the hand they have been dealt. So I do want to say that we need to turn towards opening these services back up to the city citizens themselves. And I guess I'm with Councillor Hook. I don't love these options either. I was sort of confused by why we're asking for more money. It makes a lot more sense now to me. And for my questions, some of you can probably understand that I would like to see a menu of options that people could have more choice, not less, But with the confusion element, I can kind of understand the opinion there, especially since stakeholders were engaged on that question, that I feel comfortable with this option one as well. So again, not the best options. We don't have our city services available to us that we're funding here yet, but I'm looking forward to it. And the minimal, well, not minimal, but the diminished amounts of services that we are getting, I'm pretty happy with. And so I want to thank Jana and all the other staff on here who have done so much to innovate and try to figure out a different way of doing things. I'm just so impressed by you all. So great job. And then when we ask questions like, hey, we want to be back in person, we want to be in the library, we want to be in the pool, that's coming from a place of the citizens. They want to be back in those places. They want normal again, just like we all do, right? And with the vaccines on the horizon, I'm sure a lot of you guys are feeling the same way. That's all I wanted to say real quick.
Okay. Thank you, David. Somebody else?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes. Where's that person? Oh, it's Councilor Roy.
It's Councilor. I heard what staff said, and this is not me not believing them. It's just me trying to figure out how we're going to convince our citizens to vote for not just one, but two, two little circles on the ballot, and then it's going to be more money. So I'm just finding it hard in my mind to figure out how we're going to do that. And then are we just hoping like one of them sticks, or we're just or they're going to pick one because they're going to pick the library because it's less, or are they going to realize like, oh well, this is going to be even more money than before, or how is it going to be worded differently that people aren't going to see this as, again, like, oh, well, it's going to be even more than what we're paying, on top of, as opposed to instead of. I just don't understand how the messaging is going to be any different. And then there's two of them. So that's my biggest concern. If we can't change the wording, if we can't tweak that at all, and it just has to be exactly what it is, I don't understand how it's still not going to be confusing. And so that's probably my biggest concern with option one. I understand the whole idea of like bringing back the same thing over and over again, but I also feel like I'm a little discouraged that no one from the pool, because we got so many people who were interested in keeping the pool open. I'm just, I guess, a little confused why none of them were here tonight to talk about the pool and how they felt about this split, or option one or option two. But I did receive a lot of hopeful engagement from all of the entities moving forward, and kind of brainstorming on some ideas on who to contact and how we get more buy-in from different people in the community. So that was encouraging. It's just option one makes me a little nervous, if I'm being honest.
Okay. Yeah. Good observation. Thank you. Somebody else?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, Dan?
Just to add on to what Jordan was just saying, I have the same concern. From an advocacy position, it seems to me that it would be easier to advocate for one thing than to try to convince people to vote to vote for both. Me personally, I would vote for a $2 levy. I don't, I get lots of use out of all these things, and I would there's no, they're not, in my mind, they're not separated. They're all things that I use, and they're all parts of this town that I love. So that's what I keep thinking about is it how, when we send this messaging out or when we try to advocate for these things, it's, we're going to be advocating for both. We're not going to be advocating for one over the other unless you're an individual that only cares about one, and I don't think that's any of us. And I think that makes it a little bit difficult is all. And I'm not an advocacy expert at all. It's just kind of my intuition. But like I said, I think along with Jordan, share that same concern.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Chris, Councilor.
So my 2 cents, I've been doing government accounting, government budgeting for 20 plus years on both sides of the fence. And, your critical services, your police, your water, public works, your quality of life services, they cost money. And that money's got to come from somewhere. We've just sat through 45 minutes to an hour of subject matter experts in this city staff telling us that the 40 cents, the 50 cents still aren't going to get them where they need to be. So I understand that what everybody's saying, that this makes them uncomfortable. We're worried about it passing. But at the end of the day, we just had every city staff member tell us that this is their recommendation to get right. And in my opinion, and in my experience, I would agree.
Thank you, Councilor. Somebody else?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilor Hook.
Yeah, so this Councilor Hook, I just want to thank Councilor Mullen first off for saying that. I agree with you wholeheartedly with that. Yes, I am uncomfortable with this, but I also want to say that I think it's a great idea to split these up into this library versus recreation, just because it presents it to people differently on the ballot. And yeah, I think three is too many to choose from. I think there were really great points made there. I'm thinking about it as a voter, back 10 years ago when I was voting, and how I looked at some of these measures and how I would skip over them sometimes because I'm like, I didn't know a lot about it, so I didn't really care. But when you have it like worded as recreation and library, you may get people that don't care about the library and then just don't vote for it either direction at all. But they vote for the recreation part of it because they care about the pool or they care about the parks. So I think that, if we present it as option, 2, which is the same as before, we're going to get the same result. We're going to get it to fail again. So I really think that the best path forward is something different. And although the amount does, yes, make me nervous, I'm with Councilor Mullen. I trust our city staff. They have made a great pitch as to why, and this is going to last much further beyond the pandemic. And we're going to need these funds. So, maybe one won't pass, maybe both of them won't pass, but I think that we have to try something different at this point. And the voters they're going to make the decision. They are going to make the decision anyway. If someone comes to me a year from now and says, we need to pass this anyway, I'm going to say, no, the voters made their decision. I'm not doing that. So, yeah, I just think that this is our only viable option to get something passed so that we can see our services that make our city so great stay functioning, even if they're not open right this second. And I do want to say that, the library is doing a great job. I'm getting all those emails too, and I know about all the services that are available. So I think that, and our parks are open. So there are ways that you can go and enjoy some of the things. It's just our pool is not open right now, but they are utilizing that time well. And I think it's amazing the things that they have done.
Do you folks like the idea of straw polls on these things, just to see which way the group is leaning? Or would you rather
What does that mean?
have the discussion and thrash this out?
What do you mean?
Well, just informally, a straw poll. Does anyone in the group sort of lean, with no commitment here now, sort of lean toward option 2? Anyone? Okay.
I mean, I do. I still think that I still feel like there has to be a way. I understand like the ballot measure itself, but there has to be some way in the wording that we can make it a little bit more clear that this is like
Continuation rather than new?
yes, and
Yep.
not on top of. I feel like there's got to be some way that we can use like a couple different words to get that point across a little differently.
I certainly agree.
Okay, so if I have a question, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry. So if we went with option 1 and the library passed, but the recreation didn't pass, what does that mean for, I mean, obviously, you know, Keith has said before that means we're going to close the pool. So what does that mean for our parks?
Well, we can ask Keith. I think it means.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to hop on here. We're playing musical chairs. So, I mean, I think what happens if something doesn't, if one passes and another one fails, we look at what options we have for those and look for maybe in November of next year or other options. I mean, we've discussed all kinds of things depending on what happens and what doesn't happen. Talked to the city attorney. You know, I mentioned Measure 50 early on just because there is so much limitation on what we can do in terms of taxing revenue. But I think at that point, we look at other ways to try to fund or other ways going forward or other entities or other ways to do it. So I think if you know, one passes and one fails, that's what the option is depending on which one it is, right? If it's a library, then we look at other ways to maybe fund the library. If it's the parks or the recreation district, we look at maybe other ways to do that or other approaches, depending on what the outcome of the election is, how close it is, what kind of feedback we get, things like that. So I don't think anything's off the table if it fails. It just means in the short term, budgetary wise, it's going to be more challenging. It's going to have impacts. If it's the recreation district that doesn't, the library or the pool will stay closed. You know, the funding for the parks will remain less. If it's the library, we've set the budget up that they can survive both this year and even into next year's budget. So the next 2 budget cycles after that, it starts getting really dicey. We talked about that in Susanna's presentation of the cuts that were made. So it gives us time to try to figure out what we do going forward with that. So I think the goal very much is to get them both passed. I don't think there was a split with the idea of one passes and one fails. It's just a matter of messaging and getting that out. And Councilor Ord, I understand your frustration with the ballot language. I'm going to emphasize again, there is nothing we can do on that. And you're talking about words. We literally had a city attorney spend hours arguing with the election office last time about specific language. So it is very much set. Alyssa deals with this and is reviewed by a city attorney. That is not the way we're going to be able to message or change this. That is what it is. We're stuck on that. But there's other ways that we can do that through advocacy, through the council, through advocacy, through our stakeholders, and through those letters of support in the voters pamphlet.
Okay. Thank you, Keith. Other thoughts on this? Are we moving towards some kind of motion, some action here?
Now, one more thing, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Questions for Keith. I think I vaguely remember us throwing out the idea of creating an expanded district that would cover outside city limits to some degree. I hadn't heard if we made any progress on that or if we.
Yeah, so we have looked at that. We've had conversations about that. The timing of the ballot language, I had a conversation with our city attorney about this, depending on what it would be. You would be looking at more like 2, potentially 3 years before we could have that, 18 months minimum. But there's timing, the way this all works, that I would say A more realistic approach would be a 2-year before that could come forward on a ballot initiative. And I will say it just this way, it's going to be really tough if we can't pass it in our city limits to expand the limits and then to pass it. So that just becomes a harsh reality as well. I'm not saying if we fail a third time that we shouldn't start throwing other options on the table and exploring other options. I mean, I think everything has to be on the table at that point, but that's just the reality of what we're looking at time frame wise on whether we want to do a recreational district or whether we wanted to do a library district. So that's just the reality of the situation of the timing and the legwork that would go into it. Talking with our city attorney, you'd be looking at 18 months minimum, more like 2 years and potentially longer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I just want to say we explored all kinds of funding options and had a list of everything we could do. Unfortunately, in Oregon, it's just pretty limiting.
Other thoughts and questions here?
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, somebody.
Councilor Hook here. I have a question for Councilor Mullen, just based on his experience that he has with this kind of stuff. Councilor Mullen, do you have any thoughts on like whether you, I don't know, this is kind of putting you on the spot actually, I apologize. Do you have any thoughts in general about option 1 with a reduction in like the amounts that go on the ballot? Any thoughts there, Paul?
I'm amenable to that. I think, again, what really landed with me was hearing from Jana about the 40 cents.
Yeah.
And, you know, they're in the trenches. They are very intimately knowledgeable of their specific budgets. And so they know what those magic numbers look like. So, you know, if they came up with the 40 cents, I want to honor the work that they've done by pushing forward on that. So that's the long and short of it is I haven't seen, you know, I would need to really get into that budget and what projections look like and their spending plan. But if Jana's coming to me, you know, and saying that 40 cents is what they came up with as a comfortable but not perfect number, like I said, I'd want to honor that.
Yeah, thank you. It's one of those uncomfortable decisions that we're going to make, and that's where I'm at too. So I just was curious, just because you have some of that background, what your thoughts were.
Good questions, all. Somebody else?
Mr. Mayor, I think that I would be open to option 1 if they were reduced somehow. I just don't see how you're going to get, if we can pass it at 65 cents, and I keep going back to this. So if somebody could convince me how we're gonna get people to vote for 2 at a total of 90 cents when we couldn't pass 70, then I'll vote for it. But nobody has convinced me. I understand what Councilor Mullen said, and I'm not saying that that's not, they didn't look at the numbers and say that that's what that would be like what they want to have for what we need. I don't know how we're going to get there.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilor.
This is Councilor Patty. I was going to chime in with this before, but I think this is a good point to bring up. If you look at the actual staff report on May 19th, that election, we failed by not a lot. It was 47.09% to like almost 53%. We actually increased our percentage of total voters for the levy by about 2.5%. Now, to me, that means that we were all trying to do an educational approach or campaign to the people in Stayton, and about 2.5% of them actually heard us and was like, oh, this isn't a new tax. These are city services we already have. I feel like, personally, as the individual counselor that I am, that in 3 months' time, I can convince enough people that we will overcome the less than a percentage that we were within for this last election. And I mean, honestly, if you look at the numbers, that's 17 people. We got to change 17 minds in Stayton. And I feel pretty comfortable with my ability to do that as an individual counselor. And I hope you all would endeavor to do the same with me. It sounds like Councilor Hook's all over that. And I just think that we're right there. And I think that if we keep doing our job as counselors to tell the community why this is a good decision, we'll get there. And that's where I'm coming from personally. And I am in favor of option one with the funds that are allotted by staff. I think it's right where it needs to be, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you, David.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
This is Councilor Hook. I don't know if Keith is able to pipe in here at all, because I know he's got a lot of background in politics and voting and things like that. But we were at the last election. It was an unprecedented type of an election. We had a lot of voter turnout because of what was on the ballot. I don't think that we're going to have that enthusiasm that we had in November for this upcoming one. I think it's actually going to be not quite as engaged, even if we do our part of reaching out to the community. That's not saying that we can't get it to pass. I'm just saying I don't think that we're going to see the same type of engagement that we saw in November for this coming election.
Councilor Hooker, you're going to make me say the quiet part out loud. So my election friends who may see this, I apologize. I think there'll be engagement. I think it'll be more positive engagement for us.
Well, that's good.
And I say that because people in November have a lot of interest in other races, especially when the presidential race is on there, the Senate race is on there, your House seats, all of those elections that get, and if you start looking at down ballot voting and undervoting, if you start looking at the undervotes, undervote is when somebody doesn't vote a race. When you start looking at the undervote, you're going to start to see from president to Senate is about a 5% decrease. And you start to go down, you're going to start to see a 3 to 5% decrease just all the way down the ballot. And the poor person who's the last person on the ballot is going to have the least amount of votes, right? And that happens, we talked about in November, sometimes I mentioned earlier, the signal through the noise. You're trying to pass something when people have a lot of other interest in races that they're happening. With this election, it's going to be a much smaller, it's going to be people who are more engaged in your local races who are going to take the time to open it up and to vote. You're going to get the people who are your regular voters at every election, not just the people who vote every presidential or every 2 years. So, I think overall, the better time to try to go forward is the spring elections. If I could honestly do it here in Oregon, I would do a special election at a special time where it's just us on the ballot. But unfortunately, the laws here don't allow it, because that way you can really engage those folks. But it depends on what else is going to be on the ballot. But I think this is an opportunity to get the people who are more civically minded and the people who are can be more convinced that these services are worthy of having and passing.
Thank you so much for that input. That's actually extremely helpful.
And I can't believe I just said that quiet part out loud.
Well, thank you for doing so.
Are we close to thinking about decisions here?
Produced a valid solution and part of
Ben Fleischman. He's we got a busy evening beyond this, but we can talk until we're sort of maybe not happy with the decisions, but sort of content. How much more do we need to do on this? Do we go to option one or option two?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Chris.
I have a question for Keith. On option one, what are the resolution numbers that are blank? Because when I look at the attachments, they're just X's. So how do we make that motion?
I've got them here for you. It was, so if you go with the separate, we need separate motions for each thing. So if you go with the library and the recreation separately, library one would be resolution 1018 and recreation would be 1019.
Okay, that's good to know. 1018, 1019, and what, 1020?
No, so if you did the three,
Yeah.
we don't do the two separate. So if you just do the one resolution, that would be 1018.
Oh, okay. 18. Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Is now an okay time to make a motion?
Yes, it's time.
All right. Well, I totally support our services that we provide in our city. And so I would love to make a motion to approve resolution number 1018 from option 1 as presented.
Okay.
Seconded.
Motion, is there a second, please?
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second then to approve resolution number 1018 as presented. Is there any more discussion? Alyssa, would you go ahead and poll the council, please?
Sure. Counselor Ort?
No.
Okay. Counselor Hook?
Yes.
Counselor Patty?
Yes.
Counselor Mullen?
Yes.
Counselor McDonald?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 4-0. Or sorry, 4-1.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution 1019 as presented from option 1.
okay, thank you. Is there a second, please?
Seconded.
Okay, I have a motion from Councilor Hook and a second from Councilor McDonald to approve resolution number 1019 as presented. Is there any other discussion? If not, Alyssa, would you poll the council again on this one?
Sure. Counselor Patty?
Yes.
Counselor Mullen?
Yes.
Counselor McDonald?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't hear you. Counselor Hook?
Yes.
And Counselor Ort? No? Okay. Motion passes 4-1.
Okay. Okay, then that's the way we're going to go. Two resolutions approved. So we'll forge ahead with this. Thank you for having those resolution numbers. I saw the note in there that we would figure it out depending on how the council wanted to move, but we got that. Okay, well, let's go on. And let's see, ordinance number 1048, establishing a public arts commission. Mr. Fleischman, you're here somewhere.
I am here.
Thank you for being here. Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So you will recall that 3 weeks ago, we had a discussion about the formation of a public arts commission.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, the council requested that staff put the ideas that were presented to you into the form of an ordinance, and that is in front of you is ordinance 1048. There were 2 changes from what was presented to you before. The first was just in the paragraph numbering and titling so that it conforms with the standard format of our municipal code. And secondly, a provision was added into what is now paragraph 2.40.040.2 regarding members of the Arts Commission not acting on projects regarding an organization in which they are a member. There was some discussion by the council of that 3 weeks ago. So with that, ordinance 1048 is presented to you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Under council discussion, where would people like to go with this, please?
Mr. Mayor?
Questions or thoughts? Chris?
I normally reserve these kind of comments, but I have to say, I think this is really cool. And I think this is something that I'm really proud of Stayton putting together. So.
Okay, all right, thank you. Someone else? We can do one of several things here. We can approve the first consideration of the ordinance. We can approve it with modifications, Request staff to modify it or take no action. But there's been some discussion of this already. Had some public statements on it. So where would you folks like to go with this tonight? Neat idea. You bet.
Mr. Mayor?
I think we all agreed with that. Yes, go ahead, please.
I move to approve ordinance 1048 as presented.
Seconded.
All right, a motion and a second to approve ordinance 1048 as presented, establishing a public arts commission. Okay, discussion? Okay. Alyssa, would you poll the council on this one, please?
Sure.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Okay. I didn't wait long enough. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so Dan, can you just clarify real quick? So is it just a conflict of interest type of thing? Like if it's someone can be on the board or on this commission, they just can't, if it's something having to do with their organization, they can't vote on it? Or they can't?
Correct. What's been inserted into the
Okay.
into the proposed code in the ordinance is the language is actually, now that I'm looking at it, I see a typo. It's missing a letter. But commission members shall not participate in any decision regarding an organization in which they are a member. So if they were a member, if they were a member of the Rotary Club, for instance, and the Rotary Club was proposing some project, then that member of the commission would need to abstain from the vote.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep, that's good. Okay. Others? Alyssa, would you go ahead and poll the council then, please?
Sure. Counselor Ort?
Yes.
Okay. Counselor Patty?
Yes.
Counselor Mullen?
Yes.
Counselor Hook?
Yes.
Counselor McDonald?
Yes.
All right, motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you, folks. Let's go to tonight's public hearing, the City Housing Rehabilitation Program, and I have to read a script, so bear with me here for a minute or two, and I'll get through this. Commencement of the CDBG public hearing. Good evening, my name is Henry Porter, Mayor of the City of Stayton, and I'll be presiding over this hearing. This is the time and place set for the public hearing for the purpose of soliciting testimony regarding the city's housing rehabilitation program, funded by a community development block grant through the Oregon Economic and Community Development Department. The city has used the funds from the grant to finance improvements to manufactured housing units owned by low and moderate income families in Stayton and other small cities in Marion County and in unincorporated Marion County. The hearing is now open. The hearing will be conducted in accordance with general hearing procedures of the City Council's rules. The hearing will begin with a staff report. I will then ask for testimony from the public regarding any aspect of the housing and rehabilitation program they would like to offer. There will also be the opportunity to ask questions of the council or staff. There is no decision for the City Council to make regarding the testimony at the hearing. The purpose of the hearing is to inform the City Council of the successes or failures of the city's housing rehab program. Everyone who participates is asked to start their presentation by introducing themselves by name, giving any affiliation, and their address. Participants are requested to limit their comments to 3 minutes and are further requested to avoid repetition. If someone else has already expressed your thoughts, perfectly all right to simply state agreement with the statements of the previous speaker. We are now ready for the staff report.
Good, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually need to make one correction after drafting the opening statement and providing it to you. I was informed about the resolution 1017, which is presented to you, to the council for consideration after the public hearing, and I'll get into that in a second.
Yeah.
The federal community development block grant rules require that as a recipient of the grant, that we hold a public hearing prior to closing the program in order to provide the public the opportunity to comment on the successes or failures of the program. We are nearing the end of our 2018 housing rehabilitation grant. At the end of 2017, we applied for that grant from Business Oregon. The grant application was submitted jointly with Almsville, Turner, Mount Angel, and Marion County. The grant funds were designated to provide assistance to the owners of manufactured housing units who do not own the land that their home sits on. Traditionally, our other housing rehabilitation program requires a lien to be placed on the property, and these individuals would not be eligible for that because they don't own their land, and we can't place a lien on a manufactured housing unit. So therefore, the state made this other money available, and rather than a loan, the recipients of the assistance actually receive a grant. So there is no need for a lien. Our grant application was successful. It took us quite longer than I was expecting to go through all of the necessary environmental reviews and reach the point that we had a complete contract with the state and authorization to begin the program. In late 2019, it became apparent there was not enough demand in the 3 cities and in the unincorporated portion of the county to utilize all of the funds, and the contract with the state was amended to include 12 additional cities in Marion County, and also to extend the deadline for the expenditure of all of the funds. We contract with the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments to administer the program. They have done so very expertly. And as of the time that I wrote the staff report, which would have been actually it's now 10 days ago since the staff report was written for last week's meeting that didn't happen. We had spent a total of $265,541 on 30 homes, with 30 homes totally completed, and 5 homes remaining to be completed. Our original agreement when it was the 3 other cities, Stayton and the county, was that 1/3 of the funds would go to Stayton residents, since we were taking on the burden, so to speak, of administering the program. Of the 35 homes that are being rehabbed, 12 were in Stayton, so we pretty much met that 1/3 target, representing $110,485 of the funds spent. The CDBG program requires that we have certain policies in place, and that's what the resolution 1017 before you is, a resolution that puts the city on record as supporting subsidized affordable housing, and that we will take action to affirmatively further fair housing as required by the Federal Fair Housing Act. Again, the purpose of the public hearing is for you to take testimony on the success and failures of the program. I don't know whether there's anybody on the call here tonight to testify, but that's my staff report. I will answer any questions you have or any that may come up from the public.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Any council questions for Dan on this proposal? Well, Alyssa, was there any public testimony, or Dan, was there any public testimony on this?
No, we did not receive any requests for
At all?
testimony this evening.
Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, then let me close the hearing and go to council discussion, please. This has been a apparently pretty successful thing, and we've apparently done a good job with it, Dan, and certainly my appreciation to the work you put in on it. Other thoughts and comments, please, folks?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
This is Councilor Hook. I remember sitting down with Dan and learning about this awesome program that we were putting out back when I was first running for council. I think he was talking about it, and it's really cool to see that so many houses got help. I mean, it was what, $10,000 I think per house that they could utilize to improve their homes. So, and it's not something that, like Dan was saying, it's not something that they normally would get to do because they don't own the land underneath. So incredible program. Dan, thank you for all of your hard work on that. I know that it has made a huge impact on the lives of those people. So in our community and the ones out. So thank you.
Yeah, well, kudos all around on that one, Dan. Okay, who else needs to say something on this? We're open to questions and thoughts. And been a good thing.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead, please.
This is Councilor Ort, and I just want to piggyback on what Councilor Hook said, and just I think this program was really awesome. Helping people find homes in the community can be difficult, and so having this option open to people to this type of housing is just really impactful for our community, because it just opens up another option for people to have housing and being able to take care of their housing and the help with it. So thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Okay. I guess we need to make at some point here, we need to make a decision on resolution 1017. We're presented with some options: approve it as presented with modifications, back to the council, or take no action. What would you folks like to do?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'd like to move that we approve resolution 1017 as presented.
All right, thank you.
Second.
All right, and a second, thank you. Any more discussion? If not, Alyssa, would you poll the council, please, on resolution 1017?
Sure. Councilor McDonald?
Yes.
Councilor Mullen?
Yes.
Councilor Ort?
Yes.
Councilor Hook?
Yes.
And Councilor Patty?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, communications from city staff, notice of approval for a marijuana licensed retailer. Let's see, everyone looked at that. This is the new one out on near Wilco Road. It's close to Wilco. And it's the chief said there's no problem with today's herbal choice. Just a question, Keith, are you still there? Or Dan, I guess. Dan, we now have a dispensary at the three corners of the community, right? One on Wilco, one down by the Arco station, down on Whitney. I think I'm close on that. And then the one downtown. Does that fill our need for marijuana dispensaries, or what can anyone say about any of that? I'm sorry, go ahead, somebody.
I can't begin to guess what our need is, but under our current code, when you combine the state regulations for how far from a school a retail shop must be, our local regulations for the separation between local shops, and the zoning of where any retail, no matter what they're selling, is permitted, there is the potential for up to 4 marijuana retailers in the city limits as currently zoned and currently configured.
Okay. Oh, and welcome Captain
Thanks. So yeah, I'm just here tonight to say that the license was approved and issued for today's Herbal Choice, and it's at 494 Wilco Road. Part of the approval process, chief goes out and visits the location and inspects the building and the property. Also, a background investigation is done on the owner and his list of employees. And then it does fit within the ordinance for location as the ordinance is written.
Okay. Thank you, Captain, and welcome.
No, thank you. Yeah, it's nice to be here tonight.
Okay. All right. Is there any action we need to take on that? Just kind of a notification of approval, right?
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a quick question on that, just out of curiosity?
Go ahead.
That background investigation, is that just state or is that federal?
I can actually answer that. It used to be state, and when we adopted our ordinance, we followed the state. The state has since removed that qualification. One of the owners of one of the local marijuana dispensaries has asked for that to be removed. So staff is looking at whether we want to bring that forward for consideration for removal. So it's a time, manner, place restriction. We have the option to be to have higher standards than the state, but that's really going to be a debate or a question we'll probably look about bringing forward. Captain, I'm jumping in because the police chief had reached out to me because of the concerns and looking back at ordinance, why it was passed. It was passed because at the time the state did have the requirement. The state has since removed that requirement. So the question going forward is, do we want to be more burdensome than the state or not? And we have one local entity who has asked for that to be removed because they don't feel like we should require it any longer. So that's kind of an update on hopefully answering that question.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions on that item? Okay. Okay. Let's go on then tonight. Let's see. Communications from us to each other. Got a couple of committee appointments. And like the council's affirmation on these, Parks and Recreation, Tricia Hafner, and a Housing and Neighborhood Vitality Commission, Daniel Wilson. And that's a work in progress at the time. So the actual committee that meets and works is the Parks and Recreation Committee. I don't know how many vacancies there are in that, maybe one or two. Alyssa will know. There she is.
I do. On the Parks Board, currently there's 4. This will bring us to 3 vacancies. So this will make it so they have a quorum so that they can actually have their meetings.
That Housing and Neighborhood Vitality Commission, that's kind of a work in progress, isn't it?
I believe that they have met. Dan runs that committee.
Oh, good stuff. Yeah.
I'll let Dan chime in on that one.
Yeah. They met several times, certainly pre-COVID. I'm trying to remember exactly when it was. It may be as much as 2 years ago. We had 3 or 4 meetings. We haven't really had anything for them to work on. But you may recall, I believe it was last October or so, the council gave me direction to work on updating the housing chapter in the comprehensive plan. So they will be involved in that when the time comes.
Okay, thank you. Only 2 years ago, no wonder it's got a little fuzzy. Would the council affirm appointment to those 2 people, please? There we go.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I move that we confirm these appointments for Tricia Hafner and Daniel Wilson.
Okay, thank you.
Seconded. This is Councilor Petty.
All right, thank you, Councilor.
I just wanted to make a comment. I love seeing reappointments because that means that people want to stay engaged with the community and they like what they're doing. But this is also exciting to see new applicants too that are wanting to get involved as well. So exciting.
We need to encourage that, and things get back to normal, we'll do more of that. Boy.
Yes.
Okay, Alyssa, would you poll the council on that, please?
Sure. Counselor Hook,
Yes.
Counselor Mullen,
Yes.
Counselor Patty,
Yes.
Counselor McDonald,
Yes.
and Counselor Orr.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Is there anything else this evening? Been a lively meeting, and lots of good discussion and moving forward. Thank you, Susanna, for the accurate but gloomy forecast. We'll just have to keep working at it. This one on a 5-year local option levy, that there'll be more work to do on those things before it comes up to a vote and then afterwards. But is there anything else this evening, folks?
Mr. Mayor, I would just like to say one thing. So I voted no on the levy, and it was merely for the concerns that I had voiced, but that doesn't mean that I won't be fully engaged in supporting it, both of them, and doing my best to help educate and get those passed. So I hope staff and then everyone else watching knows that my full effort will be behind those, and I want them to be successful.
So no one's going to send you a black spot. You remember reading Treasure Island?
Well, I hope they don't.
You remember Treasure Island?
I mean, I've read it, but it was a while ago. So if you want to refresh my memory, I'm down.
The old pirates would send each other a page torn out of the Bible with a black ink spot on it, and it was a death notice basically. But it's in Treasure Island.
Okay. Now we send each other glitter apparently through the mail. That's just as bad. So don't send me glitter mail. I promise I will support the levies.
So I know you'll be in there plugging away at it, as all of us will. Thank you very much. Really. Anything else?
Mr. Mayor, before we go, I just want to I'd be remiss if I didn't do a quick shout out to my public works troops. This past week, they have really put it on the line during the ice storm, putting in a lot of hours. You wouldn't believe what we went through to try to keep that wastewater treatment plant running. We lost power. We couldn't get to Down Jetter's Way because the utility poles were across the road. We were in Salem, Kaiser, 11 o'clock at night trying to buy diesel to keep that generator running so we wouldn't overflow our sewer plant. So I just want to do a quick shout out to my public works troops and give them kudos for the great work they've done for this city this last week. And that's it.
Thank you. You bet. Anything else?
Mr. Mayor, I have just one quick thing to piggyback off of Lance there. I just want to thank the city so much for having a debris drop-off location for people. I don't know how many people were so thankful for that. And then to have it like closed down and then opened right back up like the next day. I mean, I was just so floored by that kind of a service that our city can provide. So thank you for whoever made that happen, or all the people that made that happen. That was really great, because I think none of us were really expecting as much damage as we saw.
Is that still open? Asking for a friend. It is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Maybe telling my friend about that.
Yeah. Yes, we are still open. They're out there working hard. Republic Services has helped us out with drop boxes, and like Lance said, the crews have been working really hard.
Awesome. And thank you for the warming, opening up the warming center at the, oh my gosh, at the center thing that we have,
Okay.
What's that called? Oh my gosh. So community center.
We opened a community center for a charging location, and we had other materials for people to be able to use. I want to thank Jana with the library who helped out with that. Since we're giving kudos, Lance talked about the public works crews. I was just so impressed with, kind of like the wildfires. They're there. I'm seeing them out and about. To get that drop center open, just make a phone call and someone's there, and that became incredibly popular. We had to figure out a way to make sure we didn't overrun the teen center. So that was a short closure, but making sure we got it back open. I know several of us are monitoring. I've been going out there every day. It's quite popular, but making sure we can keep it open. Want to give a quick shout out to, since we haven't mentioned them, to the police department as well. There's other duties as assigned when it comes to public safety become quite interesting during an ice storm. So they were out, marking, areas where right-of-ways were blocked or streets were blocked, and working in tandem with the public works crew. I know Captain Johns had sent out an appreciation to the public works crew who were great about doing that. So, the folks that work here just came in and recognized the need and did a great job. And we are a small staff. There's not too many of us, but I appreciate the efforts that were made in just what seemed like a cascading series of events. So I joked earlier, we've done a plague, we've done fires, we've done ice. So hopefully that's enough. Hopefully it's not locusts or frogs or something at this point. But it seems like at this point, whatever you throw at us, we're sort of ready. So.
Locusts and frogs. Okay. Geez. Anything else? Let's go home then, and thank you so much. A good meeting, and take care, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.